Hey everybody, welcome back. Celtics Life Live, episode 19, but it has been a little while since we've had one of these, but it's going to be a really exciting week. And to start things off, we're going to have a few episodes this week, but tonight we're going to welcome in Sean Deveney of Sporting News. Second time Sean has joined me on the show. Sean, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Mike. How are you?
Not bad. I'm not going to lie. This is one of the most exciting weeks, not counting, let's say, the 2008 2010 NBA Finals for Celtics fans that I can remember in a long time. It's a really exciting week just in general for NBA fans. Carmelo Anthony opting out. You're going to see LeBron and company possibly do the same next week. Kevin Love's situation, the draft. There's just so much going on. So, I mean, how busy are you this week with everything going on?
Yeah, it gets a little busy. I'll head down to New York tomorrow. We'll have interviews with the players on Wednesday, and then you've got a whole bunch of things where you're trying to meet with some agents, trying to meet with some GMs, see who you can get on the phone, things like that. So it's definitely a busy week, but I'm with you. It's fun. This is why you want to do this job as much as covering the games as entertaining and all that. This is where it really gets your blood flowing is trying to find out what's really going on, trying to find out what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's the NBA has become basically a 365-day where it's exciting for almost the entire time, and of course, no different right now. The biggest thing, we put out ask some Twitter questions. The biggest thing that everyone wants to know, of course, probably the biggest storyline right now in the NBA is Kevin Love. Where is he going to go? We've seen today the Warriors. The deal is dead. The deal is not dead. It's kind of gone back and forth a few times. What's the latest you've heard on Love? And is that Golden State deal really dead, or is this just posturing on Minnesota's part?
It's dead in the sense that Golden State is not going to give them Klay Thompson. And that was a determination that that Jerry West had a lot to do with, and also that Steve Kerr had a lot to do with. Steve Kerr took that job hoping to coach Thompson and Steph Curry. And if you turn around and you trade Thompson right away, then you don't really get that chance. As good as Kevin Love is, he is not worth the package that they were talking about. A future first-round pick, Thompson, plus David Lee. I mean, it's just too much. Maybe if you start talking about Harrison Barnes, a guy who has sort of plateaued and still needs some work before he becomes the player he can be, then you might be talking about a deal that could actually get done. But certainly in the form that they were discussing over the weekend, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, it seems like Minnesota is kind of locked into looking for NBA-ready talent, which to me is a little confusing. What you have in Minnesota, if you remove Kevin Love, they were 9 games out of the playoffs last year. You remove your best player, and what are you going to add to that core to make a playoff run? Doesn't it make more sense for them to kind of – I know it's got to be frustrating because they did the total rebuild with when they traded KG and it didn't work out, but is that the right move for them to be looking for this NBA-ready talent instead of taking a boatload of picks from a team like the Celtics?
Yeah, I think that's probably the right way to go. But when you're looking at it, you've got Flip Saunders in charge now, and he's going to be the coach as well. If you're the coach, then you don't want to be given a bunch of rookies. And
right.
So, Flip Saunders, the GM, is sort of catering to Flip Saunders, the coach here, and he wants to get a competitive team as quickly as possible. But I agree with you, and I think that the way to go here is to get some picks, recognize that, look, you're in the Western Conference. Even if you improve next year, even if you play a little bit better, you win 44 games, guess what? You're still in the lottery. You still haven't gotten anywhere. I would rather do what Phoenix did and nearly got in the lottery. They won their 44, 45 games. But they focused very much on collecting draft picks, and now here they are sitting with the opportunity to make moves that will improve a team that just won 45 games. So to me, that's the way you do it. And going for ready NBA talent you're probably going to lock yourself into players that really aren't going to send you through the roof anyway. So yeah, I would much rather show some patience here and take the picks.
Now that leads me to what the Celtics reported package was from Steve Bulpett of the Herald a few days ago. He said they offered up the 6th and 17th picks this year, Kelly Olynyk, and a future first that is not the Brooklyn picks. One of the Celtics' own future firsts, whether it be 15, 16, we're not sure. And obviously there must have been some salaries in there. I would guess Bogans and Bass and expiring, and just Bogans you can just wipe off the books immediately. What do you think of that package? Do you think the Celtics need to add more to it, or do you think it's a pretty fair package for a guy of Kevin Love's stature?
They're probably going to need to add some more to it, and that's if that's your initial offer, then you know that you're going to need to add more to it, and that's what Minnesota's thinking was, and part of the thing with the Timberwolves, like we're saying, that when you're in a situation where the team wants ready-made talent, the Celtics don't have the level of talent that Minnesota's looking for. Even
right, they don't have a Klay Thompson.
Exactly right. They don't have a guy who is, that sort of elite young guy, who could develop into a potential all-star or something along those lines. So, that's really the situation with the Celtics now. So, yeah, you've got to amp up the offer in terms of picks, or find a way to get a third team involved. And go from there. But again, if Minnesota is going to be focused on what sort of young players we can get in that'll help us win right away, then the Celtics aren't going to be able to find a deal with them.
Yeah, they're dangling Olynyk and Sullinger, who I think are both good young players, but neither one of those guys has proven in any way, shape, or form to kind of be one of the top 3 guys. That's what teams are always looking for, top 3 guys on a good team. Klay Thompson has proven that. Right.
They're rotation players, no question. I think Olynyk and Sullinger will both be in the league for a long time, but I don't foresee them being 16 and 9 type of guys. Guys who you're going to want in your starting lineup, and guys who are going to be, like you say, sort of a top 3 player on your team on a good team. That's not going to be the scenario for those 2 guys.
Kind of in the same down the same path. One thing we talked about at CelticsLife, it was kind of our pipe dream scenario, but we like to talk about them, was bringing Kevin Love to Boston, via trade, and then finding a way to clear the salary and bring in a Carmelo Anthony as well. Now, the situation itself is absurd. It takes so many different variables, but that's kind of the best case scenario for the Celtics? And is that even a title team? Are Celtics fans kind of buying into Rondo, Love, and Superstar X, let's say it's Melo? Is that even enough, or should the Celtics be focusing on a 76ers type rebuild where they maybe deal Rondo, they go super young, they keep all their assets? What do you think is the best path for Ainge and company going forward? Is it the Love path, or is that just kind of fool's gold where you improve but you don't get yourself over the hump?
No, yeah, I think that they're closer to being a team that is at least a mid-range playoff team than a team that needs to completely rebuild and tear down. Now, granted, you don't want to be stuck in that region where you're constantly a number 5 seed or number 6 seed. That gets pretty tiresome pretty quickly. So
the Atlanta Hawks, I call that the Atlanta Hawks.
You don't want to be the Hawks, right, exactly. You really do want to find a way. But part of that is the way that the league is set up is if you can get in superstar players, and Rondo and Love qualify. If you can do it in a way that gives you still some other assets, then you do it. And then I think I don't know that going for Superstar X then is the right way to go. I would much rather wait till free agency next summer. 2015 has been sort of the backdrop of all this, is that's when you're going to have some really great free agents available. So that's really going to be a focus all along here. And then you've got enough picks that maybe you get one right. That's the other possibility there, is that all these teams, got to get a little lucky at some point. I mean, you look at the Spurs. Getting Manu Ginobili, getting Tony Parker. Ginobili was a second rounder. Parker was, I believe, the 28th pick.
Right.
You have to get lucky along the way. So I think you have Love, you have Rondo, and then all right, if you can get the right other superstar, perhaps you do that. But I think you're more trying to give yourself more shots at getting lucky on that third guy, because that's sort of been the formula. As much as people want to say you can plan a rebuild, you can plan to have a championship contender, you really can't. Some of it, look, it's just luck.
There's so much luck involved, and I feel like that always gets glossed over. Just it kind of off path a tiny bit, but the way teams positioned themselves to tank last year, you had the worst team in the league was the Milwaukee Bucks. They spent a good amount of money on free agency, and they end up, they go and they bring in O.J. Mayo, and they bring in Zaza Pachulia, and they give Sanders an extension. It's like they were the 8th seed, and they were like, okay, we'll try to be the 8th seed again, I guess. And they end up being one of the worst teams in the league. And then you had Phoenix trade away 5 of their 6 best players, and they end up winning 47 games, whatever they won. So there's so much luck involved that I feel like sometimes that doesn't get, and it's not fun to talk about because you have no control over it, but there's so much luck involved in building a contender. Unless maybe you're the Miami Heat, you can always clear the payroll to bring in superstars. It's
that's nature. Right. Yeah. No, and you're right. I mean, you can go back. Even I think of the -- 04 Pistons, the team that beat that great Lakers team. They had so many instances where they just got lucky. Whether it was signing Billups, and they got Billups on a mid-level exception.
Right.
They got Richard Hamilton on a cheap deal. They drafted Tayshaun Prince with the 21st pick, I think it was. They were able to pull off a late trade at the deadline for Rasheed Wallace to put them over the top. Ben Wallace they got as sort of a throw-in for in that Grant Hill trade. So I mean, you go back and you look, and there is always going to be an element of luck in how these teams come together, and that's why I say that. Look, you can try to get that third superstar, like the Heat did, but it didn't work out for the Lakers. Last 2 years ago, and it didn't work out that well for the Nets this year. When they do try the super team thing. So it's hard for that to work. I think you're much better off understanding that you do need some luck and giving yourself, buy as many lottery tickets as you can, right? Rather than just buying the one, have a couple different options where you can maybe get lucky in free agency. Maybe you get lucky with one of these picks from Brooklyn or or the pick from the Clippers or whatever it is. I'm much more in favor of give yourself as many lottery tickets as you can and maybe you hit one.
I was thinking Melo is such a pipe dream, but let's just hypothetically one more Love in Boston hypothetical. You have Love and you have Rondo. What's the third piece that would fit best? Is it a guy who can defend the paint and let Love kind of roam around? Is it a small forward who can score like a Melo? Because one guy I think they could get, and this is actually one of our Twitter questions from Celtics fan 43 asking about Omer Asik this summer. I think that getting a paint-protecting big man who can allow Love to not have to worry about trying to protect the paint, because he can't do that, would be a fantastic get, especially a guy like Asik, who you might be able to get with the trade exception they have from the Paul Pierce deal. So is Asik a realistic guy to bring in with or without Love? Because he's a guy I think the Celtics, if Houston's trying to shed money to get to bring in either LeBron or Carmelo, I think Asik can be had if you're willing to take his salary. Is that a realistic option?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, and I agree with you that if you watch that Minnesota team play much, and not a lot of people did because they didn't win many games, one of their huge problems was they had nobody to protect the paint. They had nobody to protect the rim. Nikola Pekovic, very good offensive player and a tough defensive player, but he can't jump. He's not very tall and he can't jump. So, when you get to the rim, you're going to be able to finish on those guys. Love can't jump either. So that was a big problem for that Minnesota front line is that, you could beat those two guys, and once you did, it was pretty easy to finish at the rim. You look at the numbers that they let up in terms of points in the paint, the numbers that they let up in terms of field goal percentage in the paint. I mean, they were not a good defensive team, and part of that goes to the fact that you had two guys who just were not rim protectors. You bring in a guy like Asich and put him next to Love. Now you're wiping out a lot of those mistakes. You're wiping out a lot of that weakness, and to me, that's the most important thing. Yeah, you know what? You're going to need another scorer. No question, you're going to need either your shooting guard or your small forward to be a guy who can give you 14 to 16, somewhere in that range. But to me, the much more important thing, it's easier to find one of those guys than it is to find a rim protector. So I would think that, look, if you can get Asich, then you've got to go. If you can get Love, then you got to go in and try to get Asich or somebody who can protect the rim.
Yeah, totally agree. People talked about potential of a Sullinger Love front line, and I think that you'll score points, especially with Rondo running things, and you'll have they can both shoot a little bit, they can both rebound, but you are going to get torched at the end of games by guards who can penetrate, or if you're playing a halfway decent big man, forget about it. I think Dwight Howard would probably go for 35 and 25 against that front line. So that's something I've been trying to kind of steer people off of. Even if Sullinger isn't in the deal, maybe he's your third big man and he gives you great production off the bench, but you need that guy if you're going to have Kevin Love at that last line of defense.
Yeah, I think there's no question about it, and that's one of the things when you look at Kevin Love and the possibility of getting him, you have to look ahead to the summer of 2015 as well, and the possibility of a guy like Tyson Chandler, for instance,
Yep.
that you can get him on the cheap. Obviously DeAndre Jordan, I don't think the Clippers would let him go, but he could be a free agent. You're going to have some pretty good big guys. Marc Gasol, again, I don't know if Memphis would let him go, but you're going to have some big guys who protect the rim. So and even Asich will be a free agent that year. So if you get Love and you pair him with Rondo, then I think you do have to take sort of the long view that, okay, our next step is getting that rim protecting big man, and you're going to have a chance to do that in the summer of 2015.
Absolutely. Before we get off Love, what's your gut feeling? Is Love going to be in Minnesota after the draft? Is he going to be in Minnesota all year? Is there one team you think is going to kind of jump ahead and up their offer? What's your opinion? What happens with Love? And do the Celtics have a prayer?
Well, yeah, they have a prayer. Here's the thing, and I was just talking to somebody about this just about an hour ago, and as I understand it, if Minnesota can't get this done on draft night, and right now Golden State is pretty much the leader in terms of that, then things are going to get dodgy for the Celtics. That if it's going to happen, it's probably going to happen before draft night. Because once you kind of cross that threshold and you get into July 1st, we're going to find out what happens with Carmelo Anthony. Now, if Carmelo Anthony goes back to New York or goes to Houston, Chicago is going, or if he goes to Chicago, then the loser in that, whether it's Houston, whether it's Chicago, now they're going to turn to Minnesota and put together pretty good offers. And you look at the assets that both the Rockets and the Bulls have, it's the kind of things that Minnesota is looking for. So, I do think it's sort of a race to Thursday, and if the Celtics don't get it done by then, I think it's going to be difficult because you're going to have whoever loses the Carmelo Anthony Derby is going to be willing to step in and give a pretty good offer for Kevin Love, whether it's Chicago or Houston.
That's I think makes perfect sense because both those teams I think especially Chicago. If Chicago gets Carmelo Anthony and Derrick Rose stays healthy, that has the potential to be the best team in basketball next year. I'm a little bit more skeptical on how Harden and Melo fit together, but still, that's a super team in and of itself. So whoever loses that makes a lot of sense. The other thing about the Celtics, if they don't trade him by the draft, is Danny Ainge supposed to guess which players Minnesota wants with 6 and 17? I feel like that is another obstacle because he obviously then needs to draft the players he wants the most, and if his big board doesn't look like Flip's big board, they wouldn't be a match even if Minnesota does take that deal. So wouldn't that be even another obstacle?
Yeah, that's why it's really a race to Thursday
Yeah.
for the Celtics if they can get Minnesota on board. But there is that sort of looming free agent. Now Minnesota doesn't want to be left holding the bag. If they don't think that they can get the kind of deal they want from Chicago or Houston, depending on what happens with Melo, then they might be a little more motivated to pull off this sale by Thursday, and that would benefit the Celtics. But if they have an inkling that the Bulls or the Rockets would make them an offer if they lose out on Melo, then that's not going to play well for the Celtics.
Now, do you think one of Love and one of Melo, one ends up in Houston, one ends up in Chicago? Is that kind of where you think things are heading?
Yeah, I still think Melo's a 50-50 proposition in terms of whether he goes back to New York or leaves. I think if he leaves, he's probably leaning toward Chicago, but I still think there's a chance at least that he goes back to New York. I think that obviously he tried so hard to get there a couple years ago and really force the Nuggets to send him there that for him to leave, I think he understands that would be a bit of a black eye. However, he's also at an age now at 30 where he understands that he doesn't have much time left, and if you want to win, then leaving New York might be the best option.
Yeah, I might have to leave some money on the table to go get with a contender. One thing before we jump to the draft, we're going to get to the draft in a second. I just had to ask you about, because this kind of ticked me off, Pat Riley kind of on free agency preaching to kind of LeBron without saying his name that you can't go run through the first door when times get tough. Was that not the most hypocritical thing that anyone has ever said after he lured LeBron to Miami when things got tough in Cleveland? And again, I'm not even hating on LeBron about this. LeBron, you get a certain amount of years in your prime. Cleveland couldn't put the pieces around you. He jumped to Miami. I never had a real problem with that. The decision itself was a little cheesy, but I never had a problem. Not one of these guys who says, oh, LeBron, you got to take the hard way. Cleveland put Anton Jameson and Boobie Gibson around him. Like, every other superstar gets stars. He didn't get one. He bolted. But Pat Riley, what he said the other day about when basically when the going gets tough, the tough get going, he did the same thing to LeBron 4 years ago. So what do you think about that, and what do you think? Where's LeBron headed? Is he staying in Miami before we get to the draft?
Yeah, I agree with you, Mike. I thought that was a little hypocritical that you're going to play that card with the guy that you lured from Cleveland to begin with. If that was the case, then you should have said, you know what, why don't you stay in Cleveland? That's what you really should do. That's what Magic Johnson would have done. I really thought that statement was a little hollow for me. So, look, I think LeBron understands what his options are. And you hear the Rockets and you hear the Clippers. You hear different possibilities being put out there. He knows that he can go back to Cleveland and that might be okay, or he can stay in Miami. If he leaves Miami, it will have as much of an impact on his image as it did when he left Cleveland, unless he goes back to Cleveland. That's the one way where maybe he could get around that. So those are pretty much his options. I don't see him going to Cleveland and being with a team that is basically starting over itself. There's no telling how good this team is going to be or whether it's going to be good. You don't know anything about Kyrie Irving's kind of gone backwards. Dion Waiters, it's hard to tell what kind of NBA player he's going to be. We saw how terrible Anthony Bennett was. I really can't see LeBron giving up in Miami to go to Cleveland and do that. I talked to somebody close to LeBron about a week ago, and what I was told is very likely, that was the phrase he used, that LeBron's going back to Miami, probably on a short deal though. Not the 5-year, not the full 5-year deal. Probably something more like either a 4-year deal with an option after the third, or a 3-year deal with the option out of the second, so that LeBron can go back to Miami, give it another run with those guys. But if it's not working out, he wants to have a parachute, and I think that by signing that short-term deal, he will have that parachute, and then you might see him go to Cleveland.
Now, if you are LeBron, and I guess if it's out after 2 years, that's pretty safe. I just don't get how you tie a good chunk of your remaining prime to Dwayne Wade when Wade's an all-time player, but that guy's body, it's giving out on him. He's got no cartilage in his knee from his college surgery. That seems like, I guess it will show some sense of loyalty, but that team is going to need to really work without any cap space if they're going to improve this summer. That doesn't seem to be his best option.
I think there's a couple of things you have to remember, though. For one thing, they did just get to the NBA Finals. The Eastern Conference is going to afford them the opportunity to at least get deep into the playoffs time and time again. And when you look at the teams that he could jump to, they've all got question marks. How would he play with James Harden and Dwight Howard in Houston? That might be the best fit, but even that you still don't know. I don't see a team like the Clippers actually being able to pull off a deal for him. You go to the Lakers and what have you got there? There's nothing there. If you go back to Cleveland, as you said, you don't know if those guys are any good. So I don't know that the options for him are so ready-made that leaving Miami is necessarily going to mean he's going to win a championship. I think that he has as much chance at least to get deep in the playoffs and probably back to the finals by staying with Miami at least for the next couple of years. I think that's something that he will come to realize the more he thinks about it. I think the other thing is 2010. You got to remember what happened to his image. This is a sensitive guy. I know that I've heard things. Well, it doesn't matter to him. It matters to him. The way he's perceived publicly matters to him. And if you remember 2010, he got slaughtered, and he doesn't want to go through that again. He just rebuilt all this. He's got the Sprint commercials and all that stuff now. He doesn't want to give that all away. He sees himself as much as a businessman as he does a basketball player. As a business decision, leaving Miami would be a terrible decision, and he doesn't want to do that again.
That's fair. It would hurt the image, especially if he goes ring chasing. It's just you think at this point, after the decision he made to go to Miami, he's done it once. Like, it couldn't be as bad again, but I hear what you're saying, and it's not like Miami's chopped liver. They did make it to the finals 4 straight years. I just personally don't know how much Wade has left to give.
I agree, and part of this, Mike, is all going to depend on their ability to get back to where they were is going to depend on the ability of the Heat, especially Pat Riley, to go to Dwayne Wade and say, why don't you opt out, and we're going to pay you a lot less. We'll pay you over 4 years, but we're going to pay you, the $40 million that we owe you over 4 years rather than over 2 years. That way, we can still put together a pretty good team. We can add a couple pieces here. I think that's really going to be the most important part of this. As much as we want to talk about LeBron because he is the best player in the league, a lot of what happens in Miami is going to depend on the ability of that front office to go to Dwayne Wade and say, please take less money, help us.
Yeah, and you know what he did? He did agree to go from being the alpha dog to the number 2. So maybe he's willing now to go from being the number 2 to the number 3. I do want to switch gears. I want to talk draft. Joel Embiid threw a huge wrench into what everyone thought was going to happen with this navicular bone injury. It's a bad injury. There's the list of people that have had it. Yao Ming being one of the biggest ones. That's how it ended Bill Walton's career. I think Bowie had this at one point. It's not a good list, but it's also 2014. There's a lot of medical advances. What's the latest you're hearing on Embiid? I saw Chad Ford today, had him at number 6 with the Celtics. Personally, I am all in on picking up the best player in the draft at number 6 if he's there, despite the red flags. What do you think happens with Embiid? Is there a team you don't see him slipping past?
Yeah, I think the Celtics would be at least close to that list, if not on it. I think that his floor right now would be the second Philadelphia pick, that number 10 pick. He doesn't get past that, no question. That if the Sixers made their number 3 pick and he was somehow still there at number 10, then from what I was told, they would certainly scoop him up. So he doesn't fall out of the top 10. We can start there, and then it becomes a matter of I don't think Charlotte would take him at number 9. Sacramento is probably a team that given where they're trying to go. Sacramento is also very very much interested in moving that pick. So if Embiid was there, you could see sort of what Philadelphia did last year with Drew Holiday. Jump in and basically work. Somebody from the outside could work a deal with Sacramento, saying, hey, we'll give you player X if Embiid is still there at number 8. So that's certainly a possibility. So I would say that Philadelphia obviously would take him at number 10, but I'm not even sure he gets past number 8. So I would say number 8's probably the floor, and then it becomes a matter of I don't think Utah would take him at 5. It becomes a matter of Celtics and Lakers taking him after that. And again, it's a big risk, but I do think that if you're the Celtics and Lakers, you don't like being in the lottery, and so
Yeah.
you're maybe a little more willing to swing for the fences with that pick, and so like I say, I don't think he'll wind up getting past 8. But it becomes a matter of whether 6 and 7 are willing to take that chance.
I was talking about this the other day. Danny Ainge is one of the only GMs in the top 8 to 10 picks that he's won a championship. He has job security that I think possibly, along with the guys like R.C. Buford, has some of the best job security in the league. Could that help him take a chance at number 6 when he has these other assets that other GMs would be more afraid of? Because this is a type of pick where it could cost you your job if you use a number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6 pick on a complete flameout, while Ainge isn't going to lose his job. That could help play into it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you could put Jim Buss of the Lakers,
right?
Seeing as he kind of owns the team.
Yes, that helps.
Put him in that same category. So yeah, and that's another reason why I say not only are the Lakers and Celtics more willing to take a chance with something like that, but they do have maybe a little more flexibility in terms of if he doesn't work out, they're not going to have to pay with their jobs. So yeah, I do think that that's definitely a factor, that there's less pressure to absolutely get it right without making a mistake on a high ceiling gamble like Embiid. So I do think that Boston is in position to take a chance like that. And if not, then I would say the Lakers right behind them. That one of those two teams would certainly take the risk with Embiid, even with everything we know about that injury, and you saw what it did to Yao Ming, and you're right, it's 2014, but Yao Ming didn't retire that long ago. So I mean, it's just so hard when you get a 7-footer. And you've got all these things that you have to worry about, all these big bones. It's always those little foot bones those are always the ones, and doctors will always tell you, because you can't really do anything to strengthen the area around it. You can take care of your knees in such a way that you can reduce your ACL injuries. You can't reduce the risk of foot injury. You just can't, and that's something that no matter what, all doctors will tell you that.
From the sources, your NBA, the people you've talked to, how terrified are people of this injury? Or do you get the sense that teams feel like they can work with it, or is it team-by-team basis? Because people haven't even seen his besides the Bucks and the Cavs, right? The only teams who've seen his medicals. So are teams that terrified of that maybe the best player in the draft could slip all the way to 8 or 10?
Yeah, there's no question that he is a big red flag. Don't forget that people are still not sure about the back.
That's true.
That's how we all started with this, and certainly a back injury on a big guy is scary enough. You throw in a foot injury in addition, and man, it's a lot of risk. If you watched him play at all during his time at Kansas, then you understand why you might say, all right, we'll take our chances. But certainly, just when you look at what the potential pitfalls here are, and you're right, there are teams that you can't afford. Dennis Lindsey in Utah can't afford to take Joel Embiid and have him turn into nothing. They've got to get that pick right. Rob Hennigan in Orlando. He's got to get that pick right. And if you
Right.
take Joel Embiid, man, that's a big risk. You're kind of putting your job on the line. If you then take a step back, you've won 22 and 20 games the last 2 years. If you win 20 again next year because the guy you took can't get on the floor, you might be in some trouble there.
Yeah, absolutely. Job security plays a huge role in GM's decision making. I think it's underrated. The core four guys we keep hearing linked to the Celtics before this Embiid news. You had Vonleh, Marcus Smart, Aaron Gordon, Julius Randle. Which of those four guys do you think is going to be the best NBA player? And which of the four do you think is most likely to land in Boston, if you have any inclination?
I think Aaron Gordon is still, and that's one that we've heard for about a month now. That the Celtics liked, and I really don't think much has changed in terms of that. I think that certainly when you look at it, all four of those guys have their pros and their cons. But when you look at Gordon, he is such a freakish athlete, and he has the ability to do so many things on the court. He would be a top 3, top 4 pick if he could shoot. That's the one thing. The guy can't shoot. And
42% from the free throw line.
Yeah,
that's
it's not good. It's not good, right? And but the feeling is you can teach somebody to shoot. You can't teach somebody to jump the way he does. You can't teach somebody the instincts that he has. He's got great defensive instincts. He's got great instincts as far as passing the ball, the way he sees the floor. He's a unique player for his size, and so the feeling is, can you teach him to shoot? And obviously, enough teams have seen his form to the point where they say, yeah, you know what, that can be fixed. I'm not a shooting coach. I don't know exactly what you're trying to fix with him. I know that in the end, you want the ball to go into the orange cylinder a little more often. Right. I know that's the end result they'll be looking for. But yeah, he's just such a terrific athlete that I think he's got a really good. He's also a hard worker. I've talked to some people close to him, and he's a very hard worker, and he's not going to shortchange his talent.
What's his ceiling? I see more people start talking about Blake Griffin. I think that's crazy. Yeah. I see some Shawn Marion. I don't know. There's some similarities there in his defensive versatility. He can rebound. He runs the floor like crazy. And Shawn Marion has that ugly jump shot, which does go in more than you think it would. But that's kind of who I think of. Maybe what his ceiling would be. Do you think it's someone like that, or do you think he has the ability to become an even better offensive player?
Yeah, I would think that, and I think when you say that, a lot of people say, Shawn Marion.
He's a great player.
Shawn Marion, go back and look at what he's done in his career and how good he was, especially in those years in Phoenix. Yeah, if you could get a Shawn Marion type production out of him, you'd be happy. And I do think that's a more apt comparison than Blake Griffin. He doesn't have the same kind of power that Blake Griffin does. And even though Griffin was very, very raw when he came into the league, he had a little more of a refined offensive game. So yeah, I think Shawn Marion's probably a much better comparison. He is a guy who just has that. With Marion, the thing that always sticks out, and I think Gordon has this as well, is not the first leap, it's the second leap. So you're going for the rebound or the block shot, and you don't get it. You get right back up, and you get right back up, at the same level. That's the kind of athleticism that Aaron Gordon has, and I think that's one of the things that really sets him apart in this draft.
Yeah, I get the vibe a lot of Celtics fans are kind of lukewarm on Gordon, but I can understand the infatuation because of the extreme athleticism. Looking a little deeper in the draft, is there a name or two that you see that are not projected lottery picks, or maybe they're late lottery picks that you think have star potential? I know, a guy like Kawhi Leonard's picked 15th, now is the NBA Finals MVP, but is there anyone, because that's where the Celtics' second pick at 17, are there guys that maybe you could see them taking a chance on there that end up being potentially great players?
Yeah, I think P.J. Hairston is somebody who obviously had his troubles at North Carolina, but you look at what he did in the D League, and he looked pretty polished there, and he looked like a guy who's ready to compete offensively right away. I'm not sure he'd still be there at 17. I've heard him mentioned as a possible late lottery guy. So he's certainly somebody. I think Adrian Payne too, and he could go as high as number 13 or so to Minnesota. I know that they like him, especially if they wind up dealing Kevin Love. Then Adrian Payne would be a real possibility at 13. But if he were to slip, 4-year player, and so people sort of roll their eyes. But look at the numbers and look at the way he developed. He's a late bloomer, but man, did he bloom! And
Yep.
he's the perfect kind of stretch four. Real tough defensive guy. I talked to Draymond Green about him, and Green was I think a junior when Payne was a freshman, and Green was saying this guy couldn't bench press the bar. Like, he couldn't bench press the bar when he was so skinny. And so when you look at how he developed over the course of time, you can really see that this is a guy who's put in the work and 40% three-point shooter, a guy who barely took three-point shots his first 2 years in college. He's a guy who is one of the, like I say, because he was at Michigan State for 4 years, sort of lessened his value, but I just don't think that's fair. I think that happens way too much, and then those 4-year guys wind up being, pretty strong players.
Absolutely. We wrote about this today. One of our guys, Matt Richardson, wrote about Adrian Payne specifically and how you get undervalued 3.5 years old as opposed to a 19-year-old who might not even have close to the skill set, but don't you kind of want the 19-year-old by the time they're 23 to have what Adrian Payne has?
Exactly, right. So you get all these GMs, and all they do is complain like, oh, the one and done, it's so terrible, we should have a 3-year rule. Well, you're not taking the guys who are in for 3 years,
right?
know? So, I mean, you've got some guys out there who are doing very, very well after being in for 3 years, and yet all you do is complain because nobody stays for 3 years. So, yeah, I mean, there is definitely sort of a loophole there in terms of the thinking that a lot of these GMs need to close. In terms of look, if you've got a body of evidence in front of you and it says the guy's a pretty good player, then yeah, you should probably take him.
Absolutely, I think Payne's really undervalued. Before we let you go, you mentioned something earlier that we've also talked about at Celtics Life. The Kings, with Rudy Gay opting in, they have Rudy Gay, they have DeMarcus Cousins, maybe looking to trade the 8th pick for a veteran. If the Celtics don't deal for Kevin Love, and maybe Ainge decides, Steve Bulpett also said that if they don't get Love, they might look to move Rondo in a go the youth movement.
Right.
Could Rondo to Sacramento be a fit for something like the 8th pick, maybe Isaiah Thomas as the rights to him and a Macklemore, some kind of package? But would that be something that would interest both teams, one team? If the Celtics, because all of a sudden, if they do the deal, yeah, they're going in the total rebuild, but they have the 6th pick, the 8th pick, the 17th pick, 2 picks in the next 4 drafts with some young guys like Thomas and Macklemore and Sullinger and Olynyk. So could that be another direction for the Celtics?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it certainly makes sense in terms of, if you want to do that, then you want to collect as many young assets. And Macklemore wasn't that impressive as a rookie, but he's still an asset. He's still just 1 year removed from college. So, he still has maybe value that's higher than his talent, frankly. But the value is still there because of where he was drafted and all that. And Isaiah Thomas, the numbers that he's put up, and if you can get that pick, then yeah, now you've got a pretty nice base from which you can start maybe making other trades and bringing in players. But having said that, we go through this every year, right? I mean, where Rondo's going to be traded, or twice a year, usually at during the summer and then again in February. I talk to people near Rondo, and they at every turn they are being told that they want Rondo to finish his career as a Celtic. That's what they're telling Rondo, and I know that everything that a team tells a player isn't necessarily true, but Rondo wants to be here, and they are at least telling him that they want him here. So I really doubt that they're are going to turn around and trade him if they don't get Love. Certainly, look, you answer the phone, right? I mean, somebody calls you Sacramento was interested before. I can tell you it was a one-way conversation. The Celtics, those discussions didn't get very far when Sacramento was talking to the Celtics about Rondo before. So, it's a situation where, of course, you're going to listen, but I really doubt the Celtics pull the trigger on anything. Like I said, they want Rondo long term, and Rondo wants to be here.
So, do you think Rondo ends up sticking around and signing some kind of extension, most likely next summer, because it's foolish for him to sign now because of the money left on the table? Do you think he's a long-term piece for the Celtics?
Yeah, I do think so. I think that like I said, I know he wants to stay here, guys do want to play with him. I know that he's got the reputation for being a locker room problem and all that sort of stuff. But
is that overblown? Is that overblown?
Yep, some of that's overblown because he's very competitive and he does sort of lash out in ways that maybe you wish he would. But it's really not things that are that uncommon in a locker room. And I think he's mellowed out too. I mean, he's definitely not the same guy he was 5 years ago. So I mean, I think that guys, if you're Kevin Love, you're dying to play with Rondo, and really you wouldn't be looking at Boston as a possible long-term destination if they didn't have a point guard like Rondo. So if you get rid of the guy, you really are starting from scratch, because then you go into the free agent summer, both in 2014 and again in 2015. With what are you selling? Who you got to sell, and so then you're looking at a really long rebuild.
Yeah, I think that I'm not team trade Rondo. I'm kind of like more open-minded. Depends what path they go down. But it is rare that you find one of the top 20 players in the league in his prime who wants to play in Boston, and that is a tough thing to give away. Even if Rondo's game is not perfect, his personality is not perfect, he's a big-time impact player. But I think if you're going to keep him, in your age, you got to be constantly looking to add another big-time guy, because he turns 29 this season. You give him a ton of money. I don't know if you can afford a 3 or 4 more year rebuild if you're going to go and give Rondo $80 to $100 million.
Yeah, that's right. You need to get this started sooner rather than later, and I think that's what you're seeing. With the Kevin Love pursuit, and I'm sure there'll be other things that they'll weigh over the course of the year. But I mean they're looking at this as still a long-term project, but it's a long-term project with with a finite ending. That they want this to start kicking into gear. If not this year, then certainly by the start of 2014, 2015.
Yeah, and you know what? When you're in Boston and you're competing with 3 other teams that one just won a championship and one went to the finals last year, and the Patriots are in the AFC Championship game every year, there's a little bit of added pressure there. But Sean, I want to say thanks to you. On Twitter at Sean Deveney, you can follow him. You can read his stuff this week for the Sporting News. It's going to be a crazy week. Are you going to the draft, or what are your plans for this week?
I am leaving for New York tomorrow, so it'll be a long week, and then you get like about a half an hour off, and then free agency starts. So
yeah, it's good. It's exciting though, and it's exciting. I know we've had a ton of stuff at CelticsLife. You're always coming up with the new stuff. There's always something to talk about every single day. So I'd much rather have this than the end of the Celtics season when we were writing about Brandon Bass's swimming lessons and that kind of stuff, because there was just nothing else to talk about.
Yeah, there you go.
But Sean, thanks a lot. We appreciate it. We hope to have you back, and let's see how this develops, because it's gonna be fun, I think.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks, Sean.